Marco Rubio, who had believed that he could orchestrate it all, had no clue what was in store for him. Jasmine Crockett, a veteran investigator with a steel-trap memory and a keen mind, was going to uncover the secrets that would destroy his empire. What began as a routine lunch tray clang in the Rayburn cafeteria would soon become a political earthquake that no one would see coming. It was a voice, barely above a whisper, but it held a truth too great to be dismissed. He's got money in it. That's why they got the contracts. The words hung in the air like a time bomb about to explode, and Jasmine's gut knew that this wasn't another piece of unsubstantiated rumor. Something much larger was at work. Something was going to blow. At that time, Jasmine didn't respond. She didn't blink or exhibit any reaction of surprise. She simply sipped her tea, her gaze never wavering from the binder on the table in front of her. It was the sort of thing Washingtonians learned to shrug off, but Jasmine wasn't like that. She wasn't here to accept half-truths. She knew this could be the beginning of something huge. Later that evening, sitting in her office at the Longworth building, Jasmine couldn't help but think about them. Marco Rubio's name had been ringing too frequently recently. Too many names were being spoken about him, and not ones he would have appreciated. There were murmurs about defense bills that seemed unrealistically correlated with merely two corporations that continued to get contract after contract. Folks were nodding and signing, but nobody could give a good explanation. Rubio had made a lot of individuals very wealthy, and Jasmine was beginning to suspect it wasn't just by accident. She casually dropped it in her chief of staff, Vaughn Tiller, who possessed a politician's sixth sense. "I heard it the same way last week," Vaughn said, eyes raised from his laptop. "Something about him relying on the Federal Acquisition Service, but nobody's discussing it. Too afraid." "Afraid of what?" Jasmine asked, her tone icy. "Afraid of losing their jobs," Vaughn answered, "or worse." He didn't say anything else, but Jasmine understood that worse was not an expression. Humans would defend their jobs in Washington like they would defend their lives, but Jasmine was not intimidated. She had been underestimated her entire life, to be a woman of color, then to have a brilliant courtroom brain, and always to have an unwavering determination. By Thursday, her doubts only increased. 3 different aides had spoken of Rubio's pipeline, a nickname for a cycle of repeated contracts routed through 2 Florida-based subcontractors, firms with dubious histories and foreign holdings. Every time she asked for more details, the response was the same: ask the wrong question, and you'll be iced out. But Jasmine wasn't the type to back off. She knew how to ask the right question in the wrong room and get people to talk when they least expected it. Friday, Jasmine entered a closed committee hearing on military purchases in room 21. The room was silent and she asked her questions matter-of-factly. But when Rubio was named, she observed intently. She saw something odd. 3 staffers avoided eye contact. One even got up and exited during the session, as though he couldn't handle being in the same room as her. Too suspicious. Back in her office, Jasmine stared at her whiteboard, trying to piece everything together. Names, arrows, dates, nothing solid, but her gut told her she was on the right track. And then, just as she was wrapping up for the night, her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment before picking it up. "You're asking about the wrong people, but you're right." "Be careful," the voice said. Jasmine's heart jumped. She knew she couldn't just pretend she didn't see this. Her fingers moved rapidly as she displayed the message to Vaughn. He arched an eyebrow but said nothing. The following morning, a second text appeared. "Meet me near the bottom escalator at Union Station. Navy windbreaker. Don't bring anyone." She hesitated. This was either the reprieve she was looking for, or it was bait. Either one, she couldn't help but need to know. She wrote Vaughn a note instructing him to watch things and then took off out of the building. The streets that lay before the Capitol were misty, but Jasmine felt as if she was moving toward something much blacker. Union Station was bustling with tourists, commuters, and lobbyists pretending to be casual. But Jasmine wasn't there for sightseeing. She scanned the crowd for the man in the navy windbreaker. And there he was, mid-30s, clean-shaven, eyes darting around nervously. He looked like he wanted to bolt, but he saw her and approached. "I'm not doing this again," he said quickly, voice low and shaky. He handed her a sealed manila envelope. "This isn't just about Rubio. It's bigger than that." Jasmine took the envelope, but she didn't open it immediately. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come to me?" The man massaged the back of his neck. "Because he's not what he claims to be, and somebody has got to do something before it gets worse. I considered going to a reporter, but that's suicide. You ask the right questions, you'll get things rolling." The envelope held more than Jasmine could have ever dreamed. Money trails, email logs, contractor memos, and appalling audio transcriptions. But it wasn't just about Rubio anymore. It was a web, a shadow web of corruption that went deep into the Washington halls. And the names she read sent shivers down her spine, names she recognized, names she had passed in hallways. Hours later, Vaughn and Jasmine sat in her apartment, assembling the pieces. They cross-checked public records, bank statements, LinkedIn pages, and committee reports. It wasn't poor optics, it was a crime conspiracy. And then there was CM, the enigmatic name in the emails. Before long, Jasmine and Vaughn found a link between at least 4 other government officials connected to the firms Rubio had advocated for during budget hearings. "National-level dirty," Vaughn muttered. "And you're walking straight into it." Jasmine didn't flinch. She was ready for the fight. But before she could respond, her phone rang again. Unknown number. "You've got it," the voice said. "But they're watching now. You're on a list. Be smart." Jasmine didn't wait. This was no fairy tale, it was a hurricane, and she was right in the middle of it. But she had an idea. The truth would eventually be told, but not by her design. Not yet. She needed the proper backing, someone who wasn't afraid to fight for what was right. That's when she reached out to Representative Lowell Ingram, a Republican with a reputation for integrity and a fierce distaste for backroom deals. Their meeting was quiet, off the radar. She laid out everything: documents, emails, audio recordings. Ingram's expression never wavered. "This is real," he said after a long pause. "And I'm with you." Together, they would bring the truth to light. But Jasmine was aware that this was only the start. Marco Rubio's web was by no means unbreakable, and she was prepared to reveal all the distorted, rotten threads of it. Tune in, because Jasmine Crockett isn't revealing secrets. She's going to transform Washington for all time. Jasmine Crockett had prepared herself for the fight to get dirty, but nothing could have readied her for the maelstrom that was coming her way. Every passing day saw the walls closing in on her, and the burden of the truth she bore become heavier to bear. She knew it wasn't merely about bringing down Marco Rubio, it was about bringing down the corrupt system in one fell swoop. And she was willing to do just that, regardless of the price. In order to safeguard herself and make sure the truth didn't vanish into the Capitol's dark recesses, Jasmine had come up with a plan. One was stored in a safe fireproof box in Vaughn's cousin's garage in Bethesda, another was passed to a close law school friend in Pittsburgh, and the third, a sealed certified package, was mailed to an investigative firm in San Diego with instructions: open only if Jasmine has not contacted in 2 weeks. Jasmine wasn't naive. She knew how quickly individuals in Washington could disappear, reputationally or physically. But amidst all the frenzy, she stayed on track. This wasn't political triumph. This was about exposing the corruption that was rotting in the corridors of power. As the days passed, tensions grew. The actual test wasn't gathering the truth. It was when to drop it. Every step had to be perfectly paced. One false step, and the entire operation would be in jeopardy. Monday morning arrived, a dull gray and humid. In the Capitol itself, however, the atmosphere was different, keener, with everyone seeming to feel that something was on the verge of changing. Jasmine ducked through the side door before dawn, folio full of freshly printed copies under her arm. Vaughn followed, earbuds in, mumbling a checklist down the wire. Check timestamps. Cross-refer wire transfers. Ready encrypted thumb drive for the secure deposit. At 7:05 a.m., Jasmine entered a windowless conference room, the sort of location where backroom deals were struck behind closed doors. Representative Lowell Ingram came with two trusted friends, Beth Morales from Arizona and Colin Rayner from Ohio. Both had worn a uniform before entering politics, and both hated backroom deals that placed soldiers in harm's way. They possessed the honesty to complement their bravery, and now they were Jasmine's friends in a fight for the truth. She plunged into the evidence with no fanfare. Rubio directed contracts for $246 million to Havenwell Dynamics. She started hammering on a chart Vaughn had color-coded all night. He benefited personally in Shell dividends tracked to Shoreline Consulting in Delaware. The firm is non-existent, but Rubio's sister-in-law serves on its board. Beth Morales placed her coffee on the table with such intensity that the lid flew off. "That is not a policy debate. That's a crime scene," she exclaimed, incredulous. Colin Rayner leaned over, his forehead wrinkled. "The evidence remains, but process counts. Ethics will stall. Leadership will stall. We need public pressure and procedural clout simultaneously." Ingram, always the tactician, nodded sagely. "We make the complaint in ethics today, then ask for a joint oversight hearing. In the meantime, we leak enough that it winds up driving the press after it." But Jasmine shook her head, her expression set in determination. "If we leak the story, Rubio's camp is going to just spin back with their own stories. No. We release everything at once in one controlled splash. Documents, chronology, staffer testimony. Leave no room for spin." The room grew quiet. It was risky. It was bold. Jasmine wasn't that kind of girl, though. She was finally persuaded to say something by Vaughn. "Then we choose a date and lock the doors." Ingram nodded slowly, but a warning crept into his voice. "I'll get signatures lined up across the aisle, but you'd better be ready. Midnight phone calls. Donors threatening to run you in primaries. Committee chairs yanking your bills. Get ready for it." Jasmine's determination was solid as a rock. "I didn't get sent here to play politics. I got sent here to uncover corruption." The initial wave of pushback came quicker than anticipated. A columnist for the Washington Review published an op-ed that charged Jasmine with weaponizing rumor for self-interest. Social media bots soon amplified the tone. A radio host in Florida asserted she had a grudge against Rubio because he once blocked her amendment regarding funding for the environment. Jasmine's crew soon found the source of the smear campaign. Payments had been made to a media company, Vantage Vision, which had just received money from a Rubio-aligned political action committee. The connections were too obvious to be ignored. That afternoon, Rubio's chief of staff, Patrick Moreno, cornered Vaughn near the Cannon Tunnel. "Your boss is walking into traffic," he muttered, barely moving his lips. "Tell her she still has time to change lanes." Vaughn met his gaze without flinching. "We're not the ones playing chicken." As threats picked up steam, the lights in Jasmine's apartment blazed 3 times before going out altogether. An uninvited power company technician arrived, claiming to be conducting a standard grid test. But Vaughn phoned the utility manager, and there was no such work order. They weren't dumb. They switched to battery lanterns, made duplicate copies of their files, and continued working. There was no time to waste. On Wednesday, the Office of Inspector General admitted receiving Jasmine's preliminary report. An hour later, a senior advisor from the Senate Armed Services Committee phoned Jasmine on her cell phone, attempting to stall her. "Some of your numbers don't add up," the voice declared. "Perhaps hold your findings until we verify?" Jasmine's reply was crisp. "Verification is why I'm calling the hearing." Each door that she opened led to 2 more. Vaughn made appointments with forensic accountants from the Congressional Research Service. Morales scheduled an intimate sit-down with House Oversight Ranking Member Trent Lisworth, who promised to expedite whistleblower witness protection. But still, the threats continued to morph and change. One of her past donors withdrew funding for Jasmine's District STEM initiative. Dallas area radio suggested an FEC investigation into her own campaign. The smear campaign was unrelenting, but Jasmine stood firm. She made a brief video message refuting the smears, put it up on the web, and got back to work. This battle was far from over. By Thursday night, Ingram phoned from his office window over Independence Avenue. "I have the votes to call for an emergency hearing," he declared, but Rubio's supporters lodged a motion to stall on technical grounds. Jasmine didn't hesitate. Send in a counter motion invoking the impending threat to national security. Quote the contractor emails that referred to bypassing cybersecurity tests. Ingram hesitated for a moment, visibly impressed. "Good spin. You up for cameras?" "Born ready," Jasmine answered, the seriousness of the moment hitting her. This was it. The time she had been training for had arrived at last. Vaughn handed her one last packet. At midnight, testimony outline, source index, chain of custody logs. Jasmine scanned the documents one last time before closing the folder. The hearing came tomorrow, but little did she know the war had yet to start. The following morning, the hearing room was chillier than normal, not temperature-wise, but tone-wise. At a little after 8 a.m., the panel arrived. Members' faces were grim, unyielding. No media, no cameras. Only representatives, aides, legal observers, and political sharks waiting in the wings. Jasmine sat mid-table, posture erect, folder shut with a crimson clip before her. Vaughn leaned against the wall, arms folded, his eyes scouring the room like a hawk. Chairwoman Alida Frey, a well-groomed centrist from Oregon, sat at the head of the table. Her face was inscrutable, but Jasmine saw that her lips were tightly shut than normal. "Representative Crockett, you're up," said Chairwoman Frey, her tone soothing but acidic. Hastening not at all, Jasmine unfastened the folder and started distributing documents, packet by packet, one per panel member. These contain transaction records, internal emails, procurement irregularities, and excerpts from a whistleblower affidavit implicating Senator Marco Rubio in outright meddling with federal contract approval. Jasmine stated precisely, her tone soothing but resolute. The room was silent as the panel members started to scan through the documents. Jasmine didn't stop. She took charge now. This page details transfers from Shoreline Consulting to a series of subsidiary accounts associated with Havenwell Dynamics going back 17 months, she went on. These transfers are almost exactly concurrent with Senate appropriations markups and the convening of closed-door procurement briefings. Several of the panelists shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Idaho Representative Nolan Gray raised the packet higher against his face, furrowing his brow as he absorbed what he was reading. Jasmine didn't let up. She was relentless. Page 4 lays out communication logs, while encrypted metadata verifies Rubio's office as the origin IP for scores of contacts with government officials within the Department of Defense Acquisition Office, some taking place beyond official work hours. Chairwoman Frey interrupted, her tone biting. With no hesitation, Jasmine replied, "Yes, confirmed by an independent third party with a specialty in digital forensics. I've attached their affidavit in process." Gray deposited his packet on the table, sounding unconvinced. "Are we supposed to accept that a sitting U.S. senator has manipulated military contracts for personal gain?" Jasmine gave him a cold stare in the eyes, her tone firm. "You're not required to believe until you read the papers, but you're required to act when you do." The room fell into utter silence. Next, Jasmine opened her briefcase and retrieved a small black speaker. This is an audio recording of a voice from a voice call between the top executive of Havenwell Dynamics and the liaison to a federal agency. It came in under whistleblower protection. She pressed play. The voice of the man came through in crackles over the speakers. If Rubio wants to say they're getting the deal, then they're getting the deal. I don't care what the audit reports. Make it happen, or we'll identify someone else who will. The members of the panel looked at one another, their faces a combination of shock and disbelief. Chairwoman Fry leaned in, her fingers steepled. What exactly do you expect this committee to do, Representative Crockett? Jasmine did not blink. I'm requesting a full ethics inquiry of Senator Rubio. I'm also requesting that this evidence be referred to the DOJ for independent review and that interim protections be placed on existing and pending defense contracts with Havenwell Dynamics. Fry arched an eyebrow. And what happens if we say no? Jasmine's answer was firm. Then I'll leave this room and take it to the American people. A voice in the back of the room cut into the silence. I second the motion for an ethics investigation. It was Representative Beth Morales. One by one, others echoed her, Ingram, Rayner, 2 Democrats, 1 Libertarian. Even Nolan Gray, after a considerable pause. The motion carried. Chairwoman Fry leaned back in her chair, releasing a slow breath. Then it starts. Jasmine rose, gathered her binder, and nodded curtly. Outside the chamber, Vaughn was already sending text updates. A reporter for the St. Louis Chronicle had heard about the after-hours session and was flying the coop like a hawk. Jasmine dismissed the calls for now. The fuse had been ignited, and the nation was watching. What no one expected, though, was how fast that fuse was going to burn. By sunrise, it had already exploded. The night before, Jasmine Crockett was set to meet with her team in Fredericksburg, Virginia, a neutral location away from the spotlight. Vaughn stepped into her office, holding a printout of a breaking story. His face was strained, and she could tell something had shifted. You're going to want to see this, he said, handing her the paper. Jasmine read the headline twice. Senator Rubio under formal investigation, facing possible expulsion. Her heart pounded. The ethics panel didn't wait around. They voted to send it to both the ethics subcommittee and the DOJ. You shook the hill, Jazz, Vaughn said softly. And now it's rolling. But Jasmine hadn't celebrated. Not yet. She understood how easily Washington would shift. Folks wanted to be on the correct side of history, but they needed job security, contributions, and cushy landings. The rumors had begun, though, this time not about Rubio. This time they were about her. She's too ambitious. She wants his seat. She's dangerous. Jasmine gazed out her office window at the Capitol dome, aglow in the night. They'll accuse me of trying to create a brand, she grumbled. Vaughn shrugged. Let them talk. Truth doesn't require a PR firm. What they did not know, however, was that someone much more senior was soon to burst forth into the surface. Someone who would render Marco Rubio tiny by comparison. The Senate gallery was packed, but the room was thick with an unsettling silence. C-SPAN broadcast it all. Twitchy pen taps, mute glances shared across the aisle. The air was charged. Rubio's name stood before them like a question nobody dared to answer. A resolution was written up overnight by Chairwoman Fry, requesting the Senate vote on Marco Rubio's expulsion from the body. It was unprecedented. It hadn't occurred in more than a century. Seated in the gallery above, surrounded by a handful of close aides and protected by 2 plainclothes officers, Jasmine preserved her hands in her lap. No gloating, no smiles. Just quiet. She had done her part. Now it was up to the system to determine whether it still functioned. Down on the floor, Senator Reed Carlton from Michigan took the mic, his voice firm and steady. Colleagues, this is not about politics. This is about betrayal. Betrayal of process, betrayal of the public trust, and betrayal of the very core of what we're supposed to stand for. The evidence is detailed, verified, and undeniable. If we ignore this, we send a message to every future official that personal profit is a justifiable cost of public service. There were a few muted claps, but otherwise the majority of members sat frozen, arms crossed, trying to absorb his words. Senator Tyler Graves, an Iowa moderate, then stood up. None of us want to be here, but the people we represent are watching. And if they see us defend our own at the expense of the truth, then maybe we don't deserve to be here at all. The room was plunged into a deep silence as Chairperson Merritt asked for the roll. It lasted 6 minutes. When the last roll came in, the figures were overwhelming. 71 votes in favor of expulsion, 25 against, and 4 abstentions. The room did not explode. There was no applause or cheering. It just stopped. Marco Rubio was no longer a United States Senator. He wasn't there to hear him. Nobody had a clue where he was. Inside her office, Jasmine watched the announcement scroll across 3 networks simultaneously. Vaughn handed her a cup of black coffee and sat across from her, with his arms on his knees. "You did it," he whispered. "No," Jasmine said firmly. "We did what we were supposed to." She hadn't eaten since morning, but the food would have to wait. The actual waiting wasn't yet done. It wasn't the vote, it was what followed. The hearings, the investigations, the ones who assisted him, the ones still in hiding. As she scrolled through her inbox, a name caught her eye. CM. There it was again, this time in the subject line of a leaked internal memo from Havenwell's attorney. Prepare briefing for CM, possible liability exposure if Crockett continues with Phase 2. Vaughn leaned over her shoulder, his face stern. "You still haven't realized who that is?" Jasmine shook her head, but they both knew one thing. CM was above Rubio on the totem pole. They took direction, they played the game, but they left no mark. Jasmine hesitated for a moment. They're afraid of him, whoever CM is. She grabbed her phone and called Lowell Ingram. "We're not finished," she said. "I need to be authorized to go on tracking the money. We left out someone." Ingram's voice was calm on the other line. "Then we keep on going." Jasmine exhaled. "They're going to come for me harder now." "I don't disagree," Ingram said. Outside, the protesters were back again, but this time not for Rubio. Some shouted her name. Some waved signs that said truth still matters. Others stood silently, showing photographs of veterans, teachers, and small business owners, people who lost out when dirty money went into the wrong pockets. As Jasmine left the Capitol building, one man approached her vehicle. Security stopped him, but Jasmine rolled down the window. He was around 60, dressed in a mechanic's coveralls. His eyes were worn but gentle. "I don't know how politics is done," he said quietly, "but you did something real. My brother had 2 tours overseas. If even one contract had been filled with substandard armor just to make some guy rich, thank you for preventing that." Jasmine didn't answer immediately. She nodded once, her throat constricted. "Thank you," she managed to whisper. She returned home late that evening. Vaughn remained on the phone with Ingram, making arrangements for the next phase. Jasmine sat at their dinner table, the same table where she'd initially opened that manila envelope. Now it was submerged in folders, thumb drives, and legal pads covered in names. But somewhere in those names, Jasmine recognized, was the actual power. The one who never wrote a signature, never made a phone call directly, but gave orders and made moves from behind. And Jasmine was closing in. 2 days since the vote, the Senate chamber was still reeling. Rubio's name was scratched off office placards. Staff badges were made null and void. Files were confiscated by federal agents. For some, the news cycle had already shifted elsewhere, but not for Jasmine. Not by a long shot. The whistleblower, the guy wearing the Navy windbreaker, had at last consented to testify under oath. His actual name was Elias Brenner, 39, a former deputy scheduler and procurement liaison in Rubio's office. He had sat through years of deals moving like poker chips, emails being deleted before backups could even catch them, meetings in parking garages rather than conference rooms. But guilt consumes in layers. Seated across from Jasmine and Ingram in a secure briefing room in the Capitol, Elias seemed smaller than she recalled, sunken cheeks, eyes that didn't blink. "I never thought that I would make it this far alive," he whispered. "We've got you," Jasmine said to him. "But we need everything." "Who is CM?" Elias stopped. The air was charged. "CM isn't an individual," he said at last. "It's an abbreviation. It began appearing in 2019 after Rubio met privately with a Fairstone Holdings executive." Jasmine's eyebrow furrowed. "Fairstone? The Phoenix conglomerate?" "Exactly. Fairstone is the facade, but behind it, it's controlled by Calvin Marin." The name struck like a falling hammer. Calvin Marin, former intelligence contractor turned venture investor, known for slipping through congressional oversight hearings with slick answers and no trail. He'd never held office. Never needed to. He controlled data, surveillance, and private security firms embedded in nearly every government department. "You're telling me Marin was Rubio's handler?" Jasmine asked. "No," Elias said. "Marin was running his own game. Rubio was just a tool." The room was quiet while Jasmine absorbed the news. They'd been so concentrated on the senator that they'd never looked outside the hill. Then Vaughn stormed in, his face ghostly. "We have a problem," he stated, slapping a manila folder onto the table. Within were briefs of an ongoing smear campaign. Paid pieces and lesser publications accused Jasmine of political retribution, engineered evidence, even implying connections to Havenwell's rivals. "They're attempting to turn the story on its head," Vaughn spat, his tone strained with anger. "And who exactly owns 3 of these websites?" "Calvin Marin," Jasmine grumbled. Elias again spoke, his tone firm but somber. "That's the way it goes. Marin never appears. He just commands the room." The following morning, Jasmine's email inbox filled with journalists inquiring regarding phony donations. There was a phony website with forged screenshots of wire transfers to her previous law firm. There was a TV commentator accusing her of being a plant for the defense lobby, but Jasmine stood firm. She uploaded a video from her office. No makeup, no filters, just her and her voice. "They're attempting to bury the truth in noise," she said. "But noise can't shift facts. If you really want to know who is actually afraid right now, look at who is paying to discredit the messenger." The video was shared more than 3 million times in 12 hours. Ingram and Morales went back to her office that afternoon. "DOJ's on board," Ingram announced. "They're launching a formal investigation into Marin's businesses, and they're requesting access to your documents." Jasmine nodded. "Share everything with them. I don't want this stuck in some subcommittee. I want people to be able to see what unregulated influence looks like." Later that evening, old friend Congressman Jay Sohan appeared on national radio and denounced Jasmine's investigation as an overreach. Vaughn glanced up from his phone. "He's afraid of what else is in those files." Jasmine didn't complete the thought. She didn't have to. The following morning, Jasmine entered the Oversight Committee hearing room and found Calvin Marin sitting at the far end of the table, spotless suit, silver cufflinks, unruffled eyes. No press permitted. Only lawmakers and attorneys. He stood when she entered. "Representative Crockett," he said smoothly. "You've stirred quite the reaction." Jasmine didn't shake his hand. "I'm not here to stir," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm here to clean." They sat, and the questioning commenced. Jasmine immediately recognized that Marin was rehearsed, polished, too polished. He responded without a note, never confessing, never refuting. But behind his chill stare, Jasmine caught it. Fear. Not boisterous, but there. This time, Jasmine wasn't settling for fear. She was seeking the truth, and she was closer than ever. The hearing didn't culminate with a bang. It concluded with a warning. After 3 hours of well-crafted responses, misdirection, and just the right amount of deniability to avoid perjury, Marin was released. But not before Jasmine got in one last question. "Mr. Marin," she said, her voice level. In your opinion, should elected officials with personal business interests control national defense contracts? He smiled faintly, resting his hands on the table. In my opinion, representative efficiency sometimes mandates unorthodox partnerships. The room didn't respond, but the message was received. Inside her office, Jasmine sat with Vaughn Morales and a DOJ investigator named Camille Wren, who had just flown in from California. She was sharp, early 40s, and all business. "You've disrupted something larger than any of us imagined," Camille said. "We've now got leaves tying Marin's holdings to procurement procedures in at least 5 other states, small towns, county defense boards, quiet money flows. This isn't just a Washington problem." Jasmine looked at her notes, her mind racing. "It's a national infection." "But infections fight back," Camille added. The following morning, Jasmine's campaign sites came under coordinated cyber attack. Donations stopped. Staff email addresses leaked. Ancient court cases were exhumed, spun, and fed to conservative tabloids. The objective wasn't to make it stick. It was to get people to question, even for a second. Vaughn paced her office, phone in her hand. "They're attempting to sully your name until people can no longer remember what this was all about." But Jasmine wasn't giving up. Elias Brenner was taken into protective custody at the direction of the DOJ. Another whistleblower emerged anonymously. This one, a former IT contractor for Marin's cybersecurity company, alleging files had been erased just prior to the ethics hearing. They wiped the servers like they knew what was happening, he explained in his video affidavit. That only happens if someone on the inside gave them a heads up. Then Jasmine stopped. Someone in there. Not only Congress. Her staff. The people they relied on. Someone was leaking to Marin's camp. It made sense of the leaks, the doctored screenshots, the coordinated smear campaigns. Now, Jasmine needed to know who and to make them pay for what they'd done. The minute she closed the door behind her, everything was different. Jasmine Crockett locked eyes with her 2 aides. "We have a leak," she said, flat but absolutely serious. Each email, each message, each 3 weeks' worth of meeting logs, she and he reviewed them all. 2 people had access to the files. One had been there from day one. The other? A new employee named Matthew Cord. Intelligent, courteous, always prompt, too prompt. By the next morning, he was missing. No warning. Just a notification of a family emergency. He removed his badge, erased his hard drive, left nothing behind. He was an undercover agent, Vaughn said, slamming a folder on the table. They knew we were getting close, so they used a failsafe. But it was too late. The files had already been duplicated. The DOJ had it all. The evidence was safe. Still, Jasmine couldn't dispel the sensation. Someone above was holding out, awaiting, hoping the storm would pass. She gave them no chance to do so. Instead of ducking, she walked into the flames. Jasmine demanded a public town hall. No lights, no teleprompter, just folding chairs, a mic, and the people who voted for her. An older Army veteran stood. "I saw what you did. Now they're attempting to bury you. What comes next?" Jasmine gazed at him directly in the eye. "We keep tugging. We don't quit just because it's difficult. They're wagering that we will get weary. But they don't know the people I stand for." That single sentence lit up the headlines. She wasn't talking like a politician anymore. She was talking like one of us, someone who was fighting on behalf of working people. 4 soldiers. 4 ordinary Americans who gave their all and received nothing in return, while crooked elites lined their pockets. But this wasn't done. Marin still had control, still had influence, and Jasmine wasn't finished revealing it. Weeks afterward, she appeared at Winslow Elementary in Denton, Texas. A tiny school with cracked bricks, creaky steps, and chalk marks still on the sidewalk. Inside, 23rd graders cross-legged on a multicolored rug, having come for her. The press wasn't interested. The headlines had turned to others, but Jasmine hadn't. She had arrived due to a letter written in her own hand by Mrs. Delaney, a schoolteacher who simply wanted her students to meet an honest person. A small girl with her hand up, 2 puffy hair buns, wide eyes. "Are you afraid of the people who lied?" she asked. Jasmine hesitated, breathed deep. "I used to be," she said, "but not anymore." Because the truth isn't something you carry alone. When you say it out loud, others start saying it too, and it becomes bigger than the people trying to hide it. The girl smiled. "I'm going to tell the truth, even when it's hard." Jasmine nodded. That's where it starts. Outside, the sun was setting. Vaughn met her at the car, scrolling headlines. Marin had been subpoenaed yet again, this time by the Justice Department. A larger probe was imminent, one that spanned state boundaries, and perhaps even into overseas bank accounts. "Now what?" Vaughn asked. "We don't give up," Jasmine replied. "We ensure the next individual who attempts this is aware the risk isn't worth it." In D.C., all else changed. No more hushed tones of reform. It was headline news now. Jasmine authored 3 parts of the Public Trust and Procurement Act. Genuine accountability. Genuine guidelines. No more skulking behind relatives or backroom deals. She wasn't just tidying up a mess. She was rewriting the rulebook. And one night late, after she trudged home after another committee hearing, she found a note under her door. No signature. No return address. One line only. You didn't just change the game. You reminded people why it matters. She had no idea who wrote it. Maybe a staffer. Perhaps someone who'd never met her. It didn't matter. She put it on the wall behind her desk. Weeks later, she met Elias Brenner, now living in secret, under a new name, guarded by the DOJ. They sat on a bench beside a serene Vermont lake. No reporters, no flashbulbs, just 2 individuals who had risked everything to expose something dark. "You think it's really over?" Elias asked. Jasmine shook her head. "No, but it's quieter now. And people are watching." He gazed out at the ocean. "I figured I'd regret having given it all away." "You don't," she replied. "You just grew tired of denying you saw it." For the first time in months, he smiled. That evening, Jasmine returned to Texas. No cameras, no chaos, simply purpose. Because this battle was never so much about Rubio or Marin or one contract. It was about trust, about how easily it shatters and how difficult it is to rebuild. Jasmine didn't care about statues. She didn't crave approval. She craved one thing, that when people looked at the government, they saw themselves once more. Not bribery, not power struggles, but something genuine. That night, before sleeping, she wrote in her journal, "Truth doesn't yell. It waits, and when it's heard at last, it doesn't depart." If you think that the truth still matters, if you think that someone in power should finally stand up for you, not against you, then subscribe to our channel. We deliver you stories weekly that remind America what courage is and why it still matters. Subscribe now. Be part of the struggle. Don't watch history happen. Help change it.